When I tell you how excited I was to do this list, I just don't think you understand. Like, Greek mythology was my favorite subject in school as a part of like history. It was just so much fun. It's so weird. They're just a bunch of weirdos up there, and I'm here for it, if I'm being honest. Welcome back to the Hive, everyone. I'm your host, Raechel Fisher, and get ready to count down with me in our list of top 10 Greek mythology stories that will leave you confused, because honestly, what the heck were they thinking? Number 10, Pasiphae and the Bull. The gods, man, they love to throw some bestiality as punishment at their will and pleasure. Equus probably would have been their favorite Broadway show. Everyone knows the story of the Minotaur, but do you know how it all got started? Well, let me enlighten you. King Minos begged the god Poseidon to send him a glorious white bull that he could sacrifice. The god obliged. He sent him the most beautiful, stunning creature from out of the sea, because apparently bulls come out of the sea. Anyways, but when King Minos went to sacrifice the creature, he found he could not bring himself to kill such a noble beast, so he just killed another bull instead. Outraged by his disobedience, Poseidon punished him by making his wife Pasiphae fall into uncontrollable lust with the bull. She convinced an Athenian inventor to create a hollow wooden bull for her to hide in, kind of like a Trojan horse, that could facilitate a union. Yeah. Like a union. You get what I mean by that, yeah. She then later gave birth to the one, the only, the Minotaur, which would later plague King Minos and all that fun stuff. You know, like the whole labyrinth thing. Yeah. That story. Weird. Don't understand it. But here it is. Number 9, Arachne. You'd think if someone was really good at something, they should be rewarded. But no, oh no, that's not how the ancient gods worked. Their egos were very fragile. Sorry, okay, chill out. Anyways, Arachne was a girl who was an incredibly talented seamstress, which made her a little bit cocky. One day she was so proud of her work that she proclaimed that she was a better weaver than Athena. Athena was the goddess of wisdom and war, so not a good person to mess with. Athena warned her not to make such claims, but she ignored her, so the two faced off. The two had a weaving contest in which Arachne ended up winning in front of all of the onlookers, but Athena didn't accept defeat gracefully, and instead of rewarding her, punished Arachne to feel immense overwhelming guilt, causing her to take her own life. But that wasn't enough for Athena. The goddess brought her back as a giant spider who would forever weave her designs in the forms of webs. Not very nice. Not very nice indeed. Number 8, Erysichthon. Are rich people rich because they're greedy, or greedy because they're rich? Either way, Erysichthon was, bottom line, a very greedy man with wealth that spilled over. Kind of like the Sun King, really. Planning to build another feast hall for himself because he needed another one, he demanded that a massive grove of trees be cut down to make room. This grove, however, was sacred to Demeter, the goddess of earth, but the men did as he asked, save for one tree. One tree was left standing, covered in beautiful wreaths, symbolizing every prayer she'd ever granted. When the men wouldn't do it, Erysichthon tried to do it himself. While doing so, he killed the dryad who lived in the tree, which really didn't bode well with the goddess. To suit his greed, she set down Lemos, the divine representation of starvation. Overwhelmed by a formidable hunger, the more he ate, the more he desired. He sold off his entire fortune, including his own daughter, to buy more and more food, but nothing would slake his hunger. Finally, he began eating himself, bit by bit, until he finally perished in his own greed, destitute and alone. So, moral of the story is don't cut down trees. Or don't be greedy and don't cut down trees. Number 7, Leda and the Swan. Like, Zeus, head of the gods, the one we all should be looking up to, was like questionably immoral, but like, I mean, when you're a god you can kind of do what you want. This story hurts my head because I just, like, how does A get to B? Anyways, Leda was the daughter of the king of Pleuron in Aetolia and wife to Tyndareus. One day she wandered by the river Eurotas and Zeus fell hard for this bathing beauty, but he just couldn't show up in his true form because 1, Hera, his wife and sister, was watching, and 2, she probably would explode if she saw his true form. So he went to Aphrodite to ask what to do, and she transformed him into an immaculate swan. By either seduction or nefarious action, there's two sides to the story. Some say her, and others say that she was into it, I don't know. Leda became pregnant either way and gave birth to 2 eggs. eggs! Inside the eggs were two sets of twins. One, the infamous Helen of Troy and Polydeuces, and the other two were born from Leda's husband, Clytemnestra and Castor. One pair was immortal and the other immortal, which is also still confusing because, like, didn't Helen of Troy die? I don't know. There was also another version which is pretty much the same tale, except it was the goddess Nemesis, not Leda, and Zeus turned into a beaver, and it was just really weird. So again, confusing. No idea what's going on. Number 6, Kronos. I like how the Greek gods are as like chaotic to how the world is in Greek mythology. It kind of makes a weird sort of sense, you know? This weird godly family was messed up from the very beginning, and if you don't know the original story of Kronos, then, well, here you go. Before the gods of Olympus, before Zeus and Hera, there were the elder gods Gaia and Uranus, and then their son Kronos, who married Rhea. Kronos overthrew his father, and when he heard that one of his children was going to do the same thing, he decided to eat them. All of them. Just gobbled them down like an aspirin. Rhea wasn't a huge fan of the whole thing, and eventually enough was enough. So when Kronos went to swallow Zeus, Rhea tricked him and gave him a rock instead. She stole Zeus and hid him away until the day he would be strong enough to return and overtake his father. Disguised as a cupbearer, he gave his father a purgative which made him puke up all of his siblings. Together they stormed against their father and overthrew him after 10 years in battle. Whew, that's a rough start to family life. And then Zeus married his sister, and there was a whole bunch of incest, and it's just, you know what I mean. You've heard that. Number 5, the story of Mira. What is she pointing at? Ever been so sad and disheartened that you just wish you could turn into a tree? Yeah, me too. Then people could just leave me alone. However, the only person to ever successfully transform into a tree was Mira, who turned into the Mer tree. But the story behind it is kind of messed up. Mira loved her father. A little too much. Like way too much. She was in love with her father and desperately wanted to be with him. She knew it was wrong and tried everything to resist the gnawing desire inside of her, even trying to take her own life. Her nurse found her and, fearing ever parting with her, decided to work up a scheme to hitch the two together. On the celebration of Bacchus, the queen hitched town, so the bed was empty. You see where this is going. Disguised as a maid, the nurse brought Mira to his bedchamber for 12 straight nights. On the final night, the king, overwhelmed with curiosity, removed the mask she was wearing. When he discovered that his lover had been his daughter, he reached for his sword and tried to kill her. Makes sense. Mira fled her father and ran across the desert for 9 months, and surprise, she was pregnant. When she couldn't run anymore, she begged the gods to hide her from the world. They took pity on her and turned her into the Mer tree, which one day would be hit by a running boar, revealing the child Adonis tucked into the bark. Adonis was also supposed to be super hot and awesome, which totally doesn't play by the rules of like incest. Like usually something goes wrong there. Remember Joffrey? Like that didn't go well. Number 4, Ixion. This one is confusing because it prompts a question I've never wanted to ask. How do you even make love to a cloud? When Ixion, the king of Lapiths and the son of Ares, married Dia, the daughter of Dioneus, he promised him a gift. However, when Ixion reneged on the promise, Dioneus stole some of his horses. Enraged, Ixion invited him to dinner to make amends, but instead pushed him into a fiery pit of coals. I mean, he is the son of Ares, like what you expect. He was banished for such a crime because it was completely uncool, but after a few years, wandering sad and alone, Zeus took pity on him and invited him up to Olympus. That's a good idea, where Ixion got the hots for Hera. Zeus decided to see if he would actually even try it, like would he even try it? And so he sent him a cloud shaped like Hera. Ixion did try it, and he made love with the cloud, and even stranger, it got pregnant. Their union gave birth to the first centaurs, who were literally and figuratively horny little half-horse, half-human people that roamed the world. As further punishment, Ixion was thrown from Olympus, struck by Zeus's lightning bolt, and bound by Hermes to a fiery spinning wheel. Some people just really don't deserve your pity, man. They just don't. Number 3, Alcyone and Ceyx. This one kind of hurts my heart, if I'm being honest. The love story between these two is just something everyone longs for. They were admired by humans and the gods, and yet they were still punished for it. What? Alcyone was the daughter of the god of wind and devoted wife to King Ceyx of Trachis. They were so in love with each other, they often playfully called each other Zeus and Hera. Despite many of the gods admiring them, and this was clearly an endearment, Zeus wasn't pleased. How dare they compare themselves to the gods? So he waited until Ceyx planned to visit the oracle, against his wife's wishes, who was concerned the wind he faced would be too harsh on the sea. Even her father had difficulty controlling it. But he did, and Zeus stirred a storm that sunk the ship. With his last breath, Ceyx prayed his body would be brought back to his wife. Hera took pity on the mournful widow and sent a messenger and the body back to her. After burying her husband, she flung herself into the sea to be reunited with him. The gods were horrified by Zeus's actions because they loved the two of them, so he tried to atone for his rash action by transforming them into kingfisher birds. Yeah, Zeus, turning them into birds, it really fixes everything, don't? You're fine. Number 2, Pan. What a weirdo! Pan is literally the weirdest horn dog god who ever graced the planet Earth. Firstly, the way this dude came to be makes no sense. There are many versions, but one of them involves Odysseus' lonely wife getting jiggy with 108 suitors. Pan, like, stamina, right? Pan had the hind legs and horn of a goat and was the god of shepherds, flocks, hunters, forests, pastoral music, and fertility, the last one being the most prominent. Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye would have been this guy's anthem. He pursued everything and everyone, nymphs being his favorite. They would be so desperate to get away from him they'd have to turn into trees, Mira, reeds. Echo was even killed by his minions when she denied him. He could also multiply himself, creating like a swarm of Pan. He's also the only god who ever died, but no one is quite sure how that happened, so again, another confusing thing about him. Number 1, last but not least, Thyestes and Atreus. This next one will have your brain scrambled by the end. Thyestes and Atreus were brothers constantly at odds. While their father, the king of Mycenae, was away at war, they seized the city and Atreus became king. He sacrificed a lamb with a golden fleece to seal the deal with Artemis and gave the fleece to his wife, who was fooling around with his brother Thyestes, and she gave the fleece to him. Thyestes made his brother swear that whoever had the fleece would be king, and thinking that his wife kept it safe, he agreed. Thyestes then showed the fleece. Atreus, pissed off, asked the gods for help. Hermes told him to tell Thyestes to promise that he would be made king again if the sun went backwards in the sky. Thyestes agreed, thinking it was impossible, so Zeus made it happen. Then Atreus fed Thyestes his own sons for dinner unknowingly and banished him as punishment. Then an oracle told Thyestes that in order to exact revenge, his own daughter had to have his son. So he made that happen in the grossest way possible. And then, it sounds like I'm talking about some dramatic housewife show. And then the son grew up, killed Atreus, and Thyestes became king. But wait, Atreus' sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus, came back, overthrew him, and Agamemnon finally became king, ending the whole cycle. We're good. Alright, I'm tired after that one. Guys, I'm so stoked to do this list. I'm so happy you love this stuff as much as I do. I am a sucker for mythology from all places, so put your suggestions down below so we can figure out what we want to talk about next. It's all about you guys. Welcome back to the Hive, everyone. I'm your host, Raechel Fisher, and today we are counting down our list of top 10 Greek mythology stories that will leave you confused, part 2. Let's go. Number 10. Dionysus, man. Dionysus was never a dull moment. He literally exploded into existence after his mother Semele burst into pieces when Zeus showed her his true form because he was tricked by Hera. It's a whole thing. Then Zeus continued the gestation period by carrying him in his thigh. Ever since then, he took on the responsibility of being god of fertility, winemaking, and madness, so essentially the party god, the frat boy of Olympus. However, some say that Dionysus was a result of a union between Zeus and Persephone, which is even more confusing, but hey, it's a myth, so let's go. But the most famous story about him revolves around the Bacchae and the story interpreted by Euripides. Pentheus, the king of Thebes, banished the worship of Dionysus and forbade the women of the kingdom from participating in the Bacchus. You can bet frat boy wasn't happy about this. He doesn't like being banned. He cast a spell of madness on all the women of the kingdom to attend the festival. So Pentheus caught him somehow and imprisoned him, but you can't chain a god. Dionysus Dionysus decided on his revenge. He transformed into an irresistibly beautiful woman and lured Pentheus to spy on the Bacchic rituals. When the Maenads spotted him, they thought he was a wild dog. Peeping Tom, more like. So they tore him limb from limb. One of the attackers was his mother, Agave, who didn't know the animal was actually her son in the madness that she was wrapped up in. So yeah, there are plenty more stories regarding this rascal, but this will have to wait for part 3. Number 9, Lycurgus. We talked about Mira in part 1, you know, the woman who slept with her father and then turned into a tree from which she gave birth. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch part 1 right now. Yeah, weird times. Well, here is another plant story that's equally as confusing. I know branches can sometimes look like arms, but how do you confuse your son for one? Well, Dionysus has to be involved. Lycurgus attacked and injured the aforementioned party god, Dionysus, and needless to say, the gods were not happy about it. Dionysus was basically doing a pub crawl with wine in the mortal realm, and Lycurgus wasn't jazzed about it because he was a messy dude. As punishment, Dionysus descended upon him with madness. In this violent state, Lycurgus saw a pile of weeds that he just had to get out of his garden, so he took an axe and chopped them away. Little did he know that it was actually his very own son that he was chopping to pieces. He also took the life of the rest of his family, and he even took off his own legs in his madness. After he finally passed away, he was entombed in a rock as a sign of disrespect for offending the gods. So, moral of the story, don't whine about the man of the vine, who likes to party all the time. Don't do it. Number 8, Hera the Virgin. The most confusing thing in all of Greek mythology was Hera and Zeus's marriage. Sometimes you just gotta know when it's time to call it quits. Between them being siblings, Zeus cheating on her all the time, Hera killing people over jealousy and spite, things were just messy. But did you know that Hera actually grew back her virginity annually? Not at all possible to rebuild that in real life, but if you're a god, then anything is possible. Hera was the goddess of virginity and was worshipped as the goddess of matrimony, virginity, and marriage. Though she was married, albeit unhappily, she was revered as a virgin, which clearly she wasn't. So in order to maintain this, she renewed her virginity every year by bathing in the spring of Canathus. The rites performed in order to do this were kept a secret and never spoken of, but she did it. This meant that people could still revere her for it, and she could pretend for a moment that Zeus and her never got jiggy with it, because obviously she'd want to forget that. After all, being a faithful wife to an unfaithful husband doesn't sound like a grand old time if you ask me. Number 7, Skyron. I don't know about you, but if someone washed my feet for me, the first thing I would do would say, thank you. Full stop. Like, that's it. The last thing I would do is blast them off a cliff with said clean toesies. Already there are a few things I never thought I would say to thousands of people, but what a great intro to the story of Skyron. Skyron was a bandit who was obsessed with killing people after and while they washed his feet. Everybody's got their thing, I guess. He would call travelers on the road to help him wash his feet, which a surprising amount of people agreed to do, right? Imagine someone asking you to do that today. You just hear a voice pleading from a dark alley to like, please wash my feet, wash my feet. I need someone to wash my feet. Would you go? Serious question. Anyways, when these extremely kind people would offer help, he would kick them in the face and push them over a cliff. Yeah. To add insult to injury, at the base of the cliff was a man-eating tortoise who would eat the remains of the either dead or still alive people. Talk about kicking a man while they're down. He got away with this too many times. Imagine the parents having to warn their kids not to wash random people's feet. Thankfully, Theseus, Poseidon's son, butted in and threw him off the very cliff he so enjoyed in his pastime. I like how the crime fits the punishment here, you know? It's satisfying. I like it. It's good storytelling. Number 6, Tereus, Procne, and Philomela. Okay, this one is probably the most messed up out of all the Greek tales, at least in my book. Trigger warnings galore here, folks. I'll try to be delicate. Tereus was the son of Ares and the king of Thrace. He married Procne, who was the eldest daughter of Pandion, the king of Athens. The two fell fast in love, but the Furies prepared their marriage bed and howled all night over their union. A very, very bad omen. Soon Procne longed for her little sister Philomela to join her, so Tereus went to fetch her from Athens. But as soon as he saw her, he was consumed by lust. Despite promising her father he'd protect her, he stole Philomela away and ravaged her. She promised she'd tell everyone what he did. So in order to stop that from happening, he cut out her tongue. He hid her away and told Procne that she'd been lost at sea and perished. For a year, Philomela snuck cloth from the maid that would care for her and wove a tapestry that told her story. The maid secretly brought the cloth to Procne and she immediately sought out her sister. Fueled by rage, she took her revenge. She stole the life of their own son, Itis, and fed him to Tereus for dinner. When he called for him, Procne revealed her sister and pointed to the stew that the king had finished. Tereus flew into a rage and gave chase, but the two women changed into birds to evade him. Birds. Okay. Procne turned into a swallow, Philomela a nightingale, and Tereus soon followed suit by the ravenous hoopoe bird. Would have thought it would be like a raven or like a hawk, but nope, he got the hoopoe bird. Okay. Number 5, Circe and the pigs. Circe wasn't so much considered as much a goddess, though she was one, more like a witch or an enchantress. She was the daughter of Helios, and depending on your sources, she was also the daughter of Hecate. This story is confusing because no one can really define whether she was the villain of the story or just like sad and lonely. The story goes as follows. The great hero Odysseus and his crew, after months at sea, happen upon her island. He sends his men ashore to investigate and find a cottage surrounded by magnificent yet docile beasts. Circe is heard singing, and when the men greet her, she invites them in for a hearty meal, and after months at sea, that's amazing. Unbeknownst to them though, the food is enchanted and the men all turn into pigs. Odysseus discovers this, and after Hermes places a protective charm on him, he confronts her. Her charms were powerless on him because of Hermes, so she invited him into bed instead. Yeah, sure, why not? This is also out of character for Odysseus because he was super in love with his wife back home, but I guess he couldn't say no because she was a goddess, and hey, sexy times. Circe realizes who he was, and having been foretold that Odysseus would be the only man to resist her, she lifted the curse on the men. She also made them hotter in the process, as a like, I'm really sorry. And then they all stayed for a year because I guess why not? They just stayed for a year. I don't know why. When they decided to finally leave, Circe ended up giving him a bunch of info to protect him, so I guess like she turned into a friend after all. And yeah, it's just weird. Why would you stay on an island that turned you into pigs? I don't know, do you? Number 4, Hercules holds a giant off the ground. The taller you stand, the farther you have to fall. A lesson the tall people of the world will understand. As a requirement for the 12 trials of Hercules, our great hero had to defeat a massive giant. This ginormous form was named Antaeus, an undefeatable immortal so long as his feet remained on the ground. His mother was Gaia, the goddess of the earth, so like all his powers came from her. Duh. Antaeus was a big fan of wrestling, he loved it, and Hercules was a big strong guy, so they went at it. But in order to defeat him, all Hercules had to do was lift him off the ground and wait until his power drained from him, and that was that, because if he threw him on the ground, he would just like regenerate. So that sounds more like a prolonged piggyback than wrestling, but you know, whatever gets the job done. Good for you, buddy. And coming up to our top 3, we have number 3, Procrustes. Theseus dealt with a lot of interesting characters, and Procrustes was exactly how his name sounds. Crusty. If you ever find yourself wrapped up in a scheme designed to enforce uniformity by violent methods, then you may use the term Procrustean bed to adequately describe it. Procrustes was a serial taker of lives who had a very special bed. He would, like Skyron, soothe very weary travelers into a false sense of security by offering them a bed to stay for in the night. However, if you didn't fit on the bed, which no one did, he would either violently stretch you or trim you, to put it delicately, so that you would fit the bed. Obviously, all the travelers ended up dead. The notorious criminal lived between Athens and Ulysses, so coming across travelers was pretty easy. It was just a matter of time before Theseus would encounter him and set the record straight. Having heard of his crimes, Theseus decided to turn the tables and make Procrustes fit his own bed. So, what's even more confusing about this story is that Procrustes was the son of Poseidon, and so technically was Theseus' brother, so in a way, Theseus kind of committed fratricide, but Procrustes wasn't really behaving with godlike intentions, so I'm not sure where you can draw the line there. Number 2, Tantalus and Pelops. This one. Considering Tantalus was in such good rapport with the gods, I'm not sure why he did this. As we know, being on the gods' bad side even slightly leads to some pretty harsh punishment, so imagine really being on their bad side. Tantalus was the king of the land that is now Turkey today, and the gods thought he was just swell. So great, they'd even visit him from time to time for dinner. That sounds pretty good, man. Maybe they were awful dinner guests or something, but eventually Tantalus wanted to see how far he could push his luck. He devised a test that would determine whether the gods were all-knowing. He could have been like, how many fingers do I have behind my back? He could have been like, how many apples are in my dungeon? He could have done something random like that. But instead, he did the last thing you would think of. Tantalus killed his son Pelops, cooked him up, and served him for dinner. Of course, the gods were wise to it as soon as they sat down, and considering a father eating his children was a pretty sensitive topic, Kronos, they were not pleased. The only god who ate some of Pelops was Demeter, who was blinded by grief over the loss of her daughter Persephone because she was downstairs with Hades. Needless to say, they were pissed. Zeus threw Tantalus into the abyss of Tartarus to endure an eternity of torment. His punishment was to spend the rest of time waist deep in water with a fruit tree hanging above him. Each time he went to take a drink, the water receded, and every time he went to take a bite of the fruit, the wind would blow it off course. However, as soon as he stopped lunging for it, everything would return back to normal and tempt him even further. Happy ending for Pelops though, since Demeter ate part of him, they brought him back to life, and he was turned into ivory. Pretty good. Pretty good for him. Number 1, Endymion. This story isn't exactly linear, so it remains one of the most confusing tales because it was likely pieced together. The issue for historians is that no complete story exists of it today, but we know it's about the love between the goddess of the moon, Selene, and a human man. In some versions he was the son of Thelius, others say he was raised by him, but was actually the son of Zeus. Some say he was a shepherd, others a king, but either way, this guy spent a lot of time outside at night beneath the moon. Sometimes he would even stay up all night charting the path of the moon, ignoring the desire to sleep. Soon Selene fell deeply in love with Endymion, a strikingly handsome mortal man. Selene could no longer ignore her desire and decided to visit her love, abandoning the sky altogether. Softly, gently, she crept up upon him to avoid frightening him, but the two were swept away by the throes of love, but her adoration distracted her from her duties. In addition to that, Endymion was mortal, meaning their love would be short-lived in his mortal life. So Zeus, either for punishment or pity of Selene, put her lover into a deep frozen sleep so that she may always see her love as a young man. But little more is known actually if that was punishment or pity. But hey, it's kind of beautiful. Number 10, Pandora's box. I don't understand. Why would you even have a box like this in the first place? According to Greek mythology, the beginning of the earth was free of pain and suffering. The land was perfect, kind of like, exactly like Eden. Prometheus had created man by making them out of clay, and he will, okay, well, we might get to that later in another list, but you know, he did a whole bunch of good things for man, the gods got mad. Anyways, Hephaestus made the first woman, Pandora. They gave her beauty, cleverness, charm, and curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. Her name translates to all gifted. But then Zeus was like, you know what would be a great gift? I'm gonna give this girl a box and tell her not to open it. That's like putting a B-Day present in a 4-year-old's lap and being like, ooh, enjoy the wrapping. No. Well, guess what happened? Because they gave her curiosity, it got the best of her, and she released all the troubles into the world: disease, violence, madness, greed, old age, death, plague, slow walkers, and people who eat really loud at the movies. Okay, the last thing to leave was hope, so at least that's a good thing. But you gotta wonder, who in the heck let Zeus be the leader of everything if he made a crap decision like that, with no foresight at all? Why put that stuff in a box? I don't know. Stop it. You're fine. Number 9. Echo and Narcissus. Look, there's nothing wrong with doing a fit check before you leave for work. Give yourself like a, ooh, damn, you know? Do that. Love yourself. But if you're stuck there for the whole day, there's a thing called being a narcissist, which is derived from a character in Greek mythology named Narcissus. The love story between Echo and Narcissus is a curious one, which makes very little sense. Echo was a beautiful nymph who was cursed by Hera when she tried to protect Zeus from getting caught because he was swing. She was now only allowed to say the last word anyone said, hence Echo. Echo was just one of many who pursued Narcissus, but her love was deep and true. One day, as she waited for him to say the last word, she finally went to him when he called her. Immediately, he spurned her off, saying like, no one's better than me, so get out of here, you nymph. You called her, dude. The goddess Nemesis wasn't pleased with his behavior, so she decided to punish him. Nemesis lured him to a steady pool of water where he spotted the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Himself, and he fell passionately in love. Stung by the pangs of unrequited love at last, Narcissus took his own life rather than live without being able to touch himself. Moving on. Number 8. King Midas. Whoever used the term Midas touch and thought it was a good thing needs to read the story again. The Midas touch is an allusion to King Midas, who thought having the power to turn everything into gold was gonna be a good thing. But he didn't specify, and there's always a catch. There's always a catch. After Midas welcomed with open arms Dionysus's merriest reveler, Dionysus said he would give him one wish. He wished to turn everything he touched into gold, because he needed money. He was delighted at first, turning twigs and plants to gold, but then when he got hungry, he found he couldn't eat or drink anything without it turning into gold. Panicking, his daughter ran towards him to comfort him. Out of instinct, he hugged her back because he was a hugger. She soon turned into gold. Dionysus heard his curses and prayers and told him he must wash himself in the river Patroclus. Now, whether everything turned back to normal is debatable. Some stories say they did, others didn't, so there is some confusion there. But either way, Midas learned to appreciate all the things around him as opposed to wanting more. Morals. Number 7. Daedalus and Icarus. We all wanted to jump off the roof when we were kids with wings made from paper to see if we could fly. I mean, why not? Massive metal planes are able to do it, why can't we? Literally, planes are insane. Side note, because science, that's why. But with stories like Daedalus and Icarus, a part of me still thinks it could work, as long as you don't fly too close to the sun. Daedalus was a master inventor who designed the maze for King Minos' palace. He, along with his son, built it together, but the king tricked them and trapped them inside. Daedalus was said to have earned his skills from Athena herself, and soon he fashioned a pair of wings with wax and quills. Soon, father and son were able to flee, but Icarus ignored his father's warnings of flying too close to the sun, otherwise the wax on the wings would melt. Soon, this happened and Icarus crashed into the sea and died. It's a marvel that the wings worked in the first place, but it's even more of a miracle that they evaded the Minotaur, who was like, by the way, inside the maze that they built for it. Also, no one explained how they broke out of the maze in order to get into the air into the first place, so I'm not sure how all this worked. If my parents said I couldn't jump off the roof with fake paper wings, then it only makes sense that this would fail, I guess. Number 6. Apollo and Daphne. Ever had someone like not get the hint and continue to slide into your DMs? So in order to avoid them, you like have to turn into a tree so they leave you alone? Ha! Anyways, yeah, me too. It's a tough place to be, especially in the case of Apollo and Daphne. Apollo made the massive mistake of making fun of the god Eros, who, you know, the guy with the arrows that make people fall in love, Cupid. Well, in order to mess with him, he shot a golden arrow at Apollo, causing him to fall desperately in love with the nymph Daphne, and at the same time, Eros struck Daphne with a lead arrow, causing her to detest the god. Apollo pursued her with such fervor that Daphne eventually got exhausted running away from him, so she prayed to the river god Peneus to rid him from her. So she sacrificed her physical form and transformed into the laurel tree. Desperate measures, folks. Apollo was so distraught, he made her his sacred plant and always wore stems of the laurel tree on himself, which means he would have had to break them off the branches. Which, if you're thinking about that, did Daphne feel that as a tree, you know? Did he just keep causing her more and more pain? Ugh. Number 5, Chiron. I think the last video or the video before, I don't know, my brain is pretty scrambled, but I mentioned the story of how Ixion made love to a cloud and gave birth to half horse, half men people. Yeah, well, as confusing as that is, like, where did those genes come from? Chiron was an exception to the rule. He was the son of the bond between Titan Cronus and a nymph and became a kind of honorary god. Unlike his other horny relatives, Chiron was a trusted, artistic, and intelligent being. He was still part horse, but his front legs were still human. So I guess imagine a man wearing half of those like 2-men horse costumes. Yeah. He didn't play the field, really, but was married to a nymph named Raechel and had 3 daughters and a son. He trained fantastic heroes such as Achilles, Jason, Perseus, Ajax, and Heracles or Hercules. But his most noble act was giving up his mortality in order to free Prometheus. As a reward for his sacrifice, he became a fantastic constellation in the sky. Number 4. Delphine. The most confusing thing about Delphine is actually what she was supposed to be. A python, a dragon, and some ancient accounts equate her with Echidna, the mother of all monsters, a half woman, half snake being. She has also been confused for a male serpent, but according to the earliest Homeric hymn, she was a girl dragon. Anyone get that reference? No? Okay, moving on. There are quite a few different accounts of the goddess, and descriptions of her aren't really consistent, but we do know that she was a dragon type thing born from Gaia, the Greek goddess of earth. Her name means womb, and only us ladies really understand why a womb would be depicted as a dragon. The time of the month, I know. Delphine was given the charge of guarding the Oracle of Delphi. For some reason, Apollo really wanted to control it, so Delphine and him went head to head on several occasions. He eventually slew her with his bow, allowing him to take control, so unfortunately that happened. But hey, he's a god. Number 3. Medusa. The origin of her story has a few versions, but no matter what way of getting there, she ends up as a gorgon. Her hair full of snakes and armed with a petrifying gaze, Medusa is one of the most prominent figures in Greek mythology. The story of Medusa has come under some confusion recently. Some say that the god of Poseidon took her without consent, violating her oath to Athena, and therefore the goddess punished her. Some say it was consensual, some say that she just insulted Athena somehow, but this is the most popular story. Medusa, as a mortal woman, was said to be the most beautiful woman in the world, but remained an enchanting and steadfast priestess for Athena. Though at first Athena was proud of her subject, she became irritated that the people were only at the temple to see her, because she was fire. Poseidon didn't like Athena because she won Athens, so he tried to seduce the young maiden to get her angry. She refused because she's awesome and ran to the temple and prayed to Athena for protection, which the goddess gave her none, so Poseidon took her anyways. Athena punished her, saying it was her fault, though like, obviously it wasn't. Where the heck were you, Athena? Bad move. You'd think Athena would be half decent in this situation, but guess not. So she turned her into this ferocious gorgon, and then on the way out of the temple she ran into her best friend and turned him into stone and a whole bunch of other people. It's a really sad story. She wasn't a monster. I don't think so anyways. Number 2, Pygmalion and Galatea. We talked about Narcissus, and this story is kind of in the same vein. Like, you know, you fall in love with your own work of art. The world is wide and strange, and people marrying cars and objects is actually far from myth. It's actually happened, but like why? How? No clue. Which brings us to the strange tale of Pygmalion and Galatea. Pygmalion was a sculptor and carved incredible lifelike ivory creations. His dedication to his craft left him no time for love, and even swore to a life without wedlock. But this longing one day manifested in a statue he carved of a woman of unparalleled beauty. He could not take his eyes off his creation and named her Galatea. He clothed her, decorated her, kissed her. The guy was obsessed. The festival of Aphrodite was approaching, and he prayed and prayed she would come to life so he could marry her. Aphrodite, upon seeing the sculptor, was awestruck by her beauty and agreed. As you can guess, though unlike most Greek love stories, they lived happily ever after, which is unfamiliar for the Greeks, honestly. So many tragic stories. Greek tragedy is a thing. Number 1, last but not least, Io and Zeus. Yet another reason to be wary of clouds. I honestly don't know how the gods made love via vapor, but some things we will just never know. Io was a follower of Hera, and Zeus, upon seeing her one day, fell hard in love, or in lust. Depends. She constantly avoided his lustful attempts until one day Zeus decided to take what he wanted by surrounding her as a cloud and making love to her. Without consent. Which is, for some reason, a word I can't say on YouTube, but you get the point. Hera figured that out, turned her into a white cow because she was mad, tied her to an olive tree, and had her guarded by a 100-eyed dog. Zeus then sent Hermes to get rid of him, which he did, but then Hera released the cow Io and plagued her with madness as she wandered around. While wandering, she met the poor titan Prometheus, who was cursed to have his liver torn out every day, and he comforted her by saying that she would one day return to her human form and bear a child by Zeus that would someday release him. Zeus caught up with her in Egypt, turned her back to human form, then her descendant, like 11 generations later, Hercules, released Prometheus from his chains. But wait, I thought that was Chiron. What? And on that contradictory note, here was yet another list of confusing Greek tales. If you like this video, do the thing. You know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe. I've been your host, Raechel Fisher, and until next time, stay sweet bees.